It is Sunday, the 16th of August of 2015. I'm engaged in my alternative spiritual practice of protesting against Unitarian Universalist clergy misconduct and other Unitarian Universalist injustices, abuses, and hypocrisy in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. Just laid down a few chalk slogans, and already had one or two interesting conversations with people. So yeah, Unitarians cover up and deny clergy sexual abuse of children. Entirely truthful statement based on the fact that amongst other ways of covering up and denying clergy sexual abuse of children, the most recent and I think the most shameful, or one of the most shameful ones, was when UUA moderator Jim Key stood up in front of thousands of Unitarian Universalists at the Unitarian Universalist Association's General Assembly in Providence, Rhode Island last year, and in the middle of what was supposed to be a apology to victims of clergy sexual misconduct, actually had the unmitigated gall to try to pretend that no children had ever been sexually abused by Unitarian Universalist clergy. His exact words were, there were no incidents of abuse of children or elders in my investigations. So essentially what he was saying is that, he personally investigated clergy sexual misconduct, and in his own personal investigations of clergy sexual misconduct, he found no evidence of children, or elders for that matter, being sexually abused by Unitarian Universalist ministers. Well, there's a bit of a problem with that, in that besides the fact that there's actually plenty of evidence that Unitarian Universalist ministers have in fact sexually abused children. I'm not saying all of them, or even a majority, but a certain number of Unitarian Universalist ministers are known to have sexually abused children. They've even been, charged, tried, and convicted of sex abuse of children, including rape, and sent to jail for their sex crimes. So how Jim can investigate Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse and not find any evidence of sexual abuse of children is beyond me. But let's pretend that the UUA did everything it could to prevent Jim from becoming aware of clergy sexual abuse of children in his investigations. Suppose the UUA never brought to Jim Key's attention the fact that certain Unitarian Universalist ministers were convicted of rape and sexual abuse of children and sentenced to jail terms in the past. Let's pretend that every single advocate for victims of clergy sexual misconduct somehow forgot to tell UUA moderator Jim Key that children had been sexually abused by Unitarian Universalist clergy. Let's pretend that UU Safety Net's Gail Seavey never told Jim Key about clergy sexual abuse of children. Let's pretend that Annabelle Leeserson never told Jim Key about clergy sexual abuse of children in the Unitarian Universalist Church. Let's pretend that Reverend Fred Muir never told Jim Key about clergy sexual abuse of children. Let's pretend that Reverend Deborah Pope Lance never told Jim Key about sexual abuse of children. And I could go on with a bunch of other names, but those are, the key people, that know about. Oh, here's another one. Let's pretend that UUA Vice President Kay Montgomery never told Jim Key about any clergy sexual abuse of children. Again, I could even name some UUA presidents who know perfectly well that children were sexually abused and even raped by Unitarian Universalist ministers. But let's pretend all of these Unitarian Universalists, for whatever reason, failed to inform UUA moderator Jim Key about clergy sexual abuse of children in his, so-called investigations of clergy sexual misconduct. Well, guess what? I personally told Jim Key about cases of clergy sexual abuse of children in my conversation with him in September of 2013, almost a year before his apology, certainly 8 or 9 months before his apology. I personally told Jim Key about the fact that certain Unitarian Universalist ministers including but by no means limited to Reverend Mac W. Mitchell of the Northborough and Westborough parishes in Massachusetts, had been convicted of crimes involving sexual abuse of children. And I told Jim Key that there were magazine articles and newspaper articles stating clearly, that certain Unitarian Universalist ministers had been, convicted of sex crimes that were arising out of sexual abuse of children. So I personally told Jim, even if nobody else told Jim, I did. So Jim Key just stood up in front of thousands of Unitarian Universalists and brazenly lied in an effort to bamboozle them into believing that, no children or elders have ever been abused by Unitarian Universalist ministers. Well, guess what? UUA moderator Jim Key is a bald-faced liar. And on that note, we will wrap up this little segment of my protest video and start a fresh reel after letting the sensor cool down because it's getting a little warm. So that's it for now.